if I understand that and I can lean into that, then they feel cared for and trusted and safe. And that safety, that psychological safety, I think gets a bad rap as being soft, but it's probably the hardest thing to do, to create that safety, because I've got a really different team. Like when we're hiring people, I always tell them, like, we already have a Glenn. I don't need another one. You know what I mean? Just let's hire people that are different than the people that we have, and that's great. But you don't get any benefit from it if those people coming in don't feel safe to contribute.
Welcome to Inspiration Contagion, where we spread inspiration one story at a time. I am your host, Holly Jean Jackson. Each interview spotlights transformational business leaders, their stories, challenges, and advice for how you too can lead yourself and others through inspiration. Learn how you too can achieve peak performance, build more revenue, and lead the legacy you were meant to lead. Welcome back to episode 117 of Inspiration Contagion. This week we have a special guest. His name is Glenn Hasteadt. He speaks, writes, and teaches on organizational culture and leadership. He has over 30 years of experience in IT, both in private and public, and has received statewide recognition. And the team he leads has been in the top 10 in the nation for the past 8 years for excellence and innovation. I am super excited to have Glenn here. So with that, welcome, Glenn.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to dive right in and ask you, what makes you an inspirational leader, especially with that track record of being in the top 10 for so long? Or what would you say is your secret sauce?
I guess knowing that I was no good at it. My first gig and as a leader was at a fast food restaurant. I was a manager in high school, and I made every mistake that a leader could make at once. And I was quickly demoted. And so later on in life, when I looked like I was going to get promoted again, I said, well, I'm no good at this, so I have to learn everything to do it right. And so I dove into the deep end and, made some mistakes and fixed them and was able to learn from those and keep moving. And now now I'm teaching workshops from time to time. I'm speaking and things like that.
Yeah. So thank you for being so humble and honest about that. I think that one of the biggest gaps that I have seen in both corporate America and just in general, our education system is nobody really teaches us a good process for managing other
Right.
people and bringing leaders up from the grassroots and how to do that effectively. And so one of the biggest lessons that I have learned, as well as a lot of our clients will recognize as blind spots early on, is where we need help the most. And so one of the things that Glenn just shared that I think is probably one of his superpowers is being coachable, being teachable, and then also learning to reframe our mistakes as not failures, but opportunities to learn and grow from. So I really appreciate you sharing that story.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's nobody learns by doing things right. You only learn by making mistakes, and Lord knows I've made a few. So that's what's given me, what I have.
Yeah, well, and great for you recognizing that on the heels of your next promotion, you really wanted to go into the deep end and do it right the second time around. And a lot of people wouldn't realize that they would possibly repeat that mistake. And that's where you don't learn, is when you have the same mistake repeatedly and you don't recognize the lesson or the wisdom there versus having a new route and a new path forward.
Yeah, and that's really, I mean, that's the problem in IT, and I'm sure it's the same in other industries too, is we promote people for being really good technically at whatever they're doing, and then expect them to be really good managers and leaders with no other training. Meanwhile, they're really good technically because they probably went to school, They probably have years of experience. They've learned on the job and so on and so forth. And nobody, or very few people, really hit the ground running on that.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And I think the same thing applies to business owners. So they'll
Mhm.
launch their business based on something that's a brilliant idea for the market. There's a need in the market, and they're good at solving the problem for that idea or that pain point in the market, but they don't have all the other things you need to do to be successful as a business owner. So in that, I wanted to ask you, Glenn, because obviously it's really important as we find these blind spots and we learn from these failures and have that wisdom to remain inspired. So, what would you say is your definition around inspiration, or what does that mean to you, and how has that fueled you in moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really inspired by my team. They're just so awesome, and I'm really blessed to be able to work with them every day. I mean, they're just fantastic people, and they're so smart and so driven, and we just want to get things done. And I don't want to be the one that holds them back. I want to be the one that opens the doors for them and carries the water so that they can get all these wonderful things done. Because I really believe that every organization really has great people, but you have to go out of your way to create an environment where they can be great.
Powerful words for anybody who's a business owner, or even if you just have one employee, creating that sacred container for them to grow, to feel supported. And what I like to say is lean into their own superpower abilities in this
Hmm.
lifetime, and helping them discover that sometimes too is working with employees who you have never discovered what is that magic sweet spot of what they're truly capable and just naturally gifted in, and then putting more fuel on the fire for that skill and giving them that supercharged professional development plan.
That's right. That's right. And giving them the opportunities too to spread those wings. So if they have something that they want to learn or something that they want to grow in, giving them opportunities, projects that align with that, so they can make those mistakes and they can learn from them and grow and do them better and faster and whatever the next time.
Beautiful. So I guess that's a great pivot into our next area of conversation is peak performance. So as you create this runway for them to spread their wings, kind of as a metaphor, as the leader, how would you define peak performance today, and how did you arrive at this definition?
Yeah, I mean, we can manage for performance. Like I can have KPIs and say, I need to meet exactly this. And that's useful and it has its place. Um, but I feel sometimes when you set that line in the sand, that's where everybody strives to get, and that's where they stop. Um, what I try to do instead is inspire them with a vision of where we want to go and not necessarily tell them how to get there or even really where the finish line is, just that this is the goal, this is why we exist, this is what we're trying to do, our mission. This is how we're going to treat each other, that's our values, and this is where we're going. Here's the vision. And then creating a place where they feel safe, to be able to do things, where they feel supported, where they feel like they can stick their neck out without it getting chopped off. And really just creating that environment and supportive environment where they actually care for each other and I care for them. Um, and then, the sky's the limit. Then I'd be honest with you. I have not, if I were to tell you that we were going to succeed at all the projects that we had, or that we were going to be top 10 in the nation for 8 straight years, that wasn't a foresight of mine. That wasn't something I saw coming. They just made it happen, because I didn't put those limits on them.
Mm, I love that. Yeah. So for everybody listening, I completely agree with what Glenn is sharing, but what I would add to it is it's very valuable to have those KPIs so that everybody has kind of that track record of what we need to be tracking to make data driven decisions.
Sure.
But what's more important, like Glenn just shared, is having that long-term vision, that big motivating factor, and painting the picture as the visionary and leader of how that's impacting individual lives, how it's making the world a better place or your customers happier, more efficient, whatever that picture, that storyline is. Because when people can connect directly to that vision, that mission, and the values behind doing that work, they have that sacred space. They have that way to contribute in a way that feels meaningful, purposeful, and exciting. And then that gives them the inspiration and the fuel for that jet to come off the ground and for them to spread their wings and experiment with new things. Would you agree with that, Glenn?
Oh, absolutely. And it's easier for me being in public service now because we're serving the community that we live in. And so we may not be on the pointy end of the stick like the sheriff or the fire department or EMS or DSS or whatever. Um, but we're serving the people who are. And
Yeah.
and our work is making the community a better place. So it's an easy kind of thing to rally people around.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the power of inspiration and truly powerful visionaries that are able to tell and share that story in a very aligned, authentic way. There's no limit to that. So obviously, Glenn, throughout your journey, you shared in the very beginning of our conversation, learning some difficult challenges early on and seeing some blind spots. What are some other challenges or obstacles that you have faced along in your journey to achieving peak performance today?
Yeah, I mean, you're always learning, and I guess that's always been the challenge is uh, finding the next blind spot and then addressing that. That and the very accelerated rate of change,
Mm,
especially in IT. IT is changing every day. I feel like so. Whatever you did yesterday or a week ago is already old hat. And so you've got to keep moving forward. Um, and the one thing that I think that really helped me was realizing that, um, I can put in a really good system, but if I don't lead the change with the users, it's never going to show any benefit. And so people really became more important to me even than the technology.
yeah. Oh my goodness, we could do a whole hour around that. I used to work in IT and lead organizational change as well as kind of be the person between the business side and the technology side for massive implementations. Boy, when you don't get the user experience right and user adoption and user leadership on that, you might as well not take off from the ground because it's a complete waste of time. But also, I wanted to hit on a couple other points that Glenn shared. It is such a fast paced world out there, not just with technology, but with marketing, with how over inundated people are every day and how quickly things are constantly changing and pivoting. So, the other challenge that a lot of business owners, as well as leaders in the market through traditional jobs, are facing is change fatigue and figuring out how to navigate those blind spots, grow from them, but also keep up with this accelerated pace of ever evolving news and marketing and IT and just all the things. So, Glenn, any kind of advice you would share with our listeners today on change fatigue?
Oh, yeah. You really have to be mindful of the change that you're doing and the rate at which you're changing. Um, it really takes a lot of empathy, I think, not just to lead, but also to drive change and to see where people really are. Um, we always try to get about 18% of the organization moving in the right direction. And typically, if we find that 18% is a little sluggish, maybe we'll back off on that change for a little bit and let them all take a breather. Um, and as we, relook at that or and then move it forward. But that's important. The people have to be there. If they're not ready to go, it won't ever succeed.
Yeah, yeah. And this is one of the things that I see with business owners who are navigating even selling consulting or selling a service that's a new way of operating. I don't think a lot of people understand this change fatigue issue, and they think, oh, they're ghosting me in the sales process, when in fact, the consultant or the person who's in the sales process hasn't explained how they're going to step by step walk the consumer or prospective client through that process. And we all know, I hope we know, the brain and how our biology and DNA is kind of created is around not wanting change. Like, change is very uncomfortable, and regardless of how accelerated you are as a leader, how evolved you are, there's still this thing that we just biologically fight with the brain around change. And so even if you're used to change and you're used to pivoting, we all have a limit. And so you kind of need to know that limit and have more empathy for your buyers as well as your employees.
That's
So
right.
thanks for sharing that, Glenn. Glenn, how have you created a culture of peak performance with your team and in your company?
Well, leadership is a relationship. And so every healthy relationship starts with trust. And so I'm very intentional about building trust in every interaction. And I want to make sure that they feel supported, that they have the stuff that they need to get everything done. But I want them to feel supported as a person as well. So I'll spend time with them, understand what their career goals are so that we can move them forward, um, understand what they want, what their family life is like, if they have a sick kid or, something like that. Maybe they're a caregiver. If I understand that and I can lean into that, then they feel cared for and trusted and safe. And that safety, that psychological safety, I think gets a bad rap as being soft, but it's probably the hardest thing to do, to create that safety, because I've got a really different team. Like when we're hiring people, I always tell them, like, we already have a Glenn. I don't need another one. You know what I mean? Just let's hire people that are different than the people that we have, and that's great. But you don't get any benefit from it if those people coming in don't feel safe to contribute.
Oh
And
man, we could talk all day about psychological safety, Glenn, and this world that we live in, societally, politically, is just so polarized that it's becoming more and more challenging, plus more and more sacred and important for us to have sacred spaces and psychological safety in our workplace as well as in our third places as adults. And that's just gives you the capacity to rest, breathe, and eventually innovate.
that's right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I've actually had employees that told me I couldn't wait to get back to work, um, because I needed a mental break. So they felt safe. They feel safe in our environment. Obviously, we have a job to do, and we're doing that job. But emotionally, um, maybe they were with family, Thanksgiving, and that can always be a challenge sometimes. Um, and then they couldn't wait to get back to work where they felt um, cared for and valued, and they had a job to do, and they were getting great things done, and they missed the team. So that says a lot.
Yeah, it really does. And I love how you're taking that holistic approach as a leader to supporting your employees and your team to know the whole person and what's going on with them. For
Mhm.
folks who are tuning in right now, if you're in sales or you're a business leader and you're not doing this, that's a big blind spot. And we want to address that because to create an amazing employee experience, you're leaving a lot of opportunity and growth on the table when you don't know your whole employee, as well as when you're on a sales call and you're building that trust and that relationship and really trying to understand the whole consumer's world. A lot of times clients come to me and they say, oh, Holly, I have people ghosting me all the time, and we dig into it and they're just following up on email. They're not ghosting you, like you're just not the center of their world. Or that person actually has something medical. I've recently had somebody who's going through cancer, and another person who's in a caregiver role, other people that have children that are going to be born soon. life continues on and we have rapid change, and it's not about you. It's about what's going on in that person's world. And if you don't ask the right questions, you'll never know.
Yeah, absolutely. And as leaders, typically in organizations, if somebody's going through one of those life crises, everybody tiptoes around them for a couple of weeks and then, goes about business as usual. That doesn't help the employee, and that certainly doesn't help the team. So we try to lean into those events. If someone is going through a health event or parent is going through a health event, we lean into that, so that they feel cared for. And then they come back and they work. I mean, it's not just about, this unicorns and rainbows and all this stuff. When they feel cared about, my objectives are much more important to them.
Yeah.
And and the vision of where we're going. So I don't focus on this quarter, this month, this year. I'm focused on where are we 5 years from now? Where are we 10 years from now? And the month and the year happen. You know,
Yeah.
those short-term goals happen because we're always moving towards those further reaches.
Absolutely. The more you invest in allowing your employees and customers to feel seen and heard, it makes the specifics of the KPIs and the goals and that vision so much more accessible and so much more easy, and certainly a lot more fun. So, kind of on that note, Glenn, since it's not just unicorns and sunshine, I want to ask you, when have you left money on the table in the work that you do, and what did you do to fix it?
Yeah, I mean, there's always projects that don't bring everything that you hope it would bring. But again, if you've got a 5 and 10 year view, um, people learned doing that project still. I mean, nothing's a waste. I mean, people learned important, like how did it fail? How did we miss the mark? The change fatigue? We weren't mindful of the change fatigue. And that keeps us from making that mistake 2, 3, 4 more times. When we're mindful about, why it failed and go back and do that after action.
Yeah, I love that. So recently I was re-listening to the book Always Be a Buyer by Dan Sullivan. And one of my favorite quotes, kind of related to what you just shared, is that he says all the time that every experience is for my best learning.
Hmm.
And what I love about this is even if you have what we call a revenue blunder, right? So we've left money on the table, we had something that quote unquote failed. It's not a failure. It's a lesson. It's an opportunity for growth. And it's funny,
Hmm.
people ask me, what are your biggest regrets in business? And I don't have any, because when I look back at something that, on paper, it was in the red and it was a missed opportunity financially, I learned so much. There's so much richness in that experience that then actually created so much more revenue that there's not a regret there. It's a huge lesson. And as long as you're taking the wisdom from that and not repeating that insane action,
That's right.
that same insane action, then you're good.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I had a lady. There was a leader that I had, and she taught me a really valuable lesson that there are no useless meetings. I used to get very frustrated when I was in a meeting and I felt like I didn't need to be there, or if it needed to be, it could have been an email. I want to get stuff done, and sitting in a meeting was not getting stuff done. And she taught me that there's no useless meetings because you can see the relationship between the people in the room. You understand the politics. You understand what drives everyone in the room. Even if you're just watching how not to run the meeting or learning how to run the meeting, there's always something you can learn.
I'm just laughing because one of my biggest pet peeves from corporate America was there were a lot of what I would describe as useless meetings. But when you frame it that way of how to not run a meeting, how to run a meeting, I learned quickly how to manage up and how to manage down and how to make meetings more productive.
Yep,
So that our meetings became less useless in terms of bottom line. So we're totally aligned there, Glenn.
that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So, Glenn, I want to ask you a couple closing questions, some rapid fire ones. This has been a really great conversation. So, thank you so much for taking the time to share with our listeners. what is the best piece of advice that you would share with our listeners today?
You know, there's a lot of great resources out there. I've got some videos I put out, but there's a bunch of books. Take the time to learn that stuff. Put the effort into leadership, put the effort into the people skills, the soft skills. It's just so important. And be really mindful of looking in the mirror. What I tell leaders when I'm teaching leadership is, if you don't like the culture in the room, you have to look and see, what are you doing to promote that culture or build that culture. Because I look at leadership as like, if I take a group of people and put them on an island and tell them that they're safe, what do? Well, they're building shelter, they're building, amenities, farms, things like that. If I put them on an island and tell them there's a predator, now they're building weapons and walls and watch schedules. And you are that difference. It's the same people, same island. The only difference is the leader.
Oh my goodness, Glenn, we could go down a whole rabbit hole of metaphors of where we are in the country right now, but we're not going to do that because that's not productive right now. But anyways, for any of our leaders in the United States, if you happen to come across this episode, I'm very curious on your answer of how we pivot the culture today. But anyways, my last rapid fire question for you, Glenn, is what's the legacy you wish to leave behind?
Yeah, I think that's probably it. Be intentional about, the environment that you create around yourself. Everyone creates a culture. Everyone's worked with people that everybody tiptoes around or would do anything for. And as a leader, that shadow extends to the entire team. So you want to be mindful about creating that trust, mindful about creating spaces for safety, mindful about creating that feeling that your team has that they're supported. You want to be really intentional about what you're doing as a leader, where most people kind of just, it happens. What happens, and they're not really thinking about their leadership style.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Such sage wisdom and advice, everyone. And this goes beyond just traditional leadership in terms of being a VP or a president or a CEO or a business owner. This extends to being the leader of your home, being the leader of your relationship, being the leader if you have a pet, being the leader in your community. So my goodness, if we all were more intentional and thoughtful and value aligned on our mission and what we're skilled at as leaders in all of these ways, we would not have nearly the problems we have today. So my challenge to our listeners today is, what one step can you take to be a better leader in whatever capacity that looks like for you today? And if you found this conversation really helpful, I have Glenn's YouTube, LinkedIn, and his website, so you can connect with him. He offers trainings. He's a speaker. You can come to your organization and share more on this and much more. With that, thank you so much, Glenn.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Amazing. And to our listeners, if you loved this interview, please share it with someone else so that you can spread the conversation and spread the inspiration like a contagion. We value your feedback. We value your comments. So please help us spread inspiration globally. All right. We'll see you on our next episode. Thank you for joining the show today. I hope you were inspired. More importantly, I hope you take action. If the show inspired you, I ask that you subscribe and share it with your network. Let's spread inspiration together today.